Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use the promo code DNVR25. You'll save 25% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman. I'm the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons. And joining us, as has become our weekly custom, is the voice of the Colorado Rockies on AT&T Sportsnet. And, of course, the host of the Drew Goodman podcast. It's Drew Goodman.
You're now going into, announcer mode. Who's your – I never asked you this because I kid you about this before. When going back, Reed Saunders has been doing it for a number of years, and Alan Roach, obviously prior to that. Which was your favorite, fellas? Lead in, Dante Bichette, Larry. Who was it?
Yeah. I mean, that's so hard. Alan Roach is such a classic. I heard it's seared into my mind. You could hear it coming through. I can remember as a kid hearing it coming through the radio or the TV when we weren't even watching, right? You've got your back to the game and you would hear that Dante.
That's pretty good one.
Is that right?
No, you did a good job, but that I agree with you. It's classic. Do you have one, Patrick?
Well, again, growing up on the East Coast, Bob Shepard was the guy at Yankee Stadium.
The best.
And number 2, Derek Jeter.
The best.
Number 2.
Yeah.
He's the greatest of all time. The best was even walking around outside the stadium, and he would do the announcements of like what you could bring in the stadium. And there was always one trigger word that was hilarious, how he would say the word bottle. No cans or bottles. He didn't say the T's, just bottle. And it just, okay, Bob, you're the best. Love it.
Wasn't he a professor at Columbia, if I remember right? I believe he was a professor at Columbia. And I remember, oh, man, I was doing a game at Yankee Stadium. And Bob was in this. Were you ever in the press box at the old Yankee Stadium?
No, just the new one.
And maybe it was a new. I can't remember, but obviously he's passed away. But he was in this like little plexiglass, and it was like perfect for COVID. Now, I mean, that was his little space, and he did it, I believe, probably well into his 80s, and at one point, I mean, he was an older man, and at one point, I looked over there and I realized he hadn't introduced anybody in a hitter or two. He had fallen asleep for a second. He'd fallen asleep. But I also think the greatest thing ever, the greatest tribute to both Bob Shepard and give Derek Jeter enormous credit, is that even after Bob Shepard was gone, that everybody else got introduced by whoever the hell the PA guy was, but Derek Jeter, it was the Bob Shepard recording. And I mean, it kind of gives you, I'm not a, we've talked about this, fellas. I'm not a Yankee guy, right? My dad grew up 3 blocks away from there, went to the Polo Grounds. But that made you stop when you heard Bob Shepard's voice. I remember when he used to do, I'm a huge New York Giant football fan.
Giants games, yeah.
Yeah, right? And I know you are as well, Patrick. Am I right? Aren't you a Giant?
Not so much. No. Well, Broncos.
Okay. Listen, I want to see the Broncos do well unless they match up with the Giants. And then my hometown allegiance come out. So anyhow, it would be, especially back in the heyday, tackled by Carson and Taylor, and just like, when you were at the game, kind of gave you chills. Pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and announcers don't really sound like that anymore either. It's why, for anyone who doesn't know, to give you an idea, his nickname was the Voice of God. Like, I mean, how does that not sum it up right there?
Right. Yeah, there's a couple guys I've heard that phrase utilized for. Certainly, as you said, Bob Shepard, and the other. And I don't want to pull the old "I'm older than you" card because I wish I was younger than y'all. But so that was from the southern part of that's coming out, the southern part of New York State. Anyhow, Do you remember John Facenda, who was the original voice of NFL films?
Yes, I
Oh,
know
sure.
that name. Yeah.
Okay, like
Tundra of Lambeau Field.
I wouldn't have known
That's
the
what I
name,
was
but
saying
I
too,
would have
Patrick,
known the
right.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar cadence, kind of similar cadence, but yeah, John Facenda, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I always say when you look at your, favorite announcers or people that call games, a lot of times, I think the three of us talked about this with Scully. The three of us could be given, let's say, Vin, whatever. If somebody typed out what he said, a stenographer said in a half inning, and you or me or Drew, we read it verbatim, practiced it, right? There's no way that it's ever going to sound like Vin. So it's not just the verbiage, and he had a beautiful command of the language, still does. But it was the voice, right? John Facenda's voice, Bob Shepard's voice as public address folks. And I even think, you can point to other announcers that you gravitate to in whatever sport. And a lot of it has to do with the voice. It really does.
Patrick and I, you've mentioned before you're not a big pro wrestling guy, but I feel like we would be remiss, and Patrick already knows where I'm going with this, to not mention Howard Finkel, one of the great voices in the history of ring announcing. Like, yeah, okay, pro wrestling, it's not real sports. Fine.
He's not Michael Buffer, but he's in there. He should be counted.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Let's get ready to rumble is certainly an all-timer, but that Howard Finkel of "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WrestleMania." It's just there's something about Finkel, man. He was great. Did it for like 30 years too.
Yeah,
Madison Square Garden.
There's guys with this. And it's not always like the deepest voice. Sometimes it's a unique voice, but it has to be easy on the ears. So when you think of guys through the years, a lot of times it's kind of the quality of the voice, and it can be soothing, it can be distinctive, but for whatever reason.
Yeah. I wonder if a guy like Howard Cosell could be successful today. I mean, there was a certain, it was more of his cadence that maybe, I don't know, is hard to kind of pin down in a sense in today's day and age. But Bob Shepard, again, John Facenda, like all these guys are legends. And so when I was a kid, and so I'll age myself a little bit, I remember when he passed away and just knowing this guy is legendary. And my local newspaper, I clipped out like his obituary because it was like, whoa, this is Howard Cosell. This is the guy. And I saved it for so long. But I wonder if Howard Cosell could make it in 2021. I don't know. Maybe it's too much personality.
Yeah, that's a great question, because he had the platform that really doesn't exist now, in that when Monday Night Football came on, everybody watched. Because there was a handful of channels back then. There wasn't, the advent of cable was in its infancy. Certainly didn't have what you have now, hundreds and hundreds of channels and digital and all kinds of distractions and places to get your entertainment. So people watched, and he was distinctive. And there weren't many people who watched who loathed him just to hear what he may say that got under their skin each week. There were people who watched who weren't even football fans because they wanted to hear Howard Cosell. I had the opportunity, I met him a couple times. He lived in my hometown. And I remember my dad telling me one time, as my dad was politically active, and he had an opportunity to visit with Howard, and so Howard took like an hour to express his exact and well thought out opinions on whatever the heck the topic was, and you just sat basically and listened to him. He was an attorney by trade.
Paid by the word, right?
Very ethnocentric, which I think also I would wonder how that would play, to your point, Patrick, nationally now, because he was he was New York through and through. So that's an interesting one. Other voice, like, who has a different kind of voice, but is one of the all-time great announcers, and for me the greatest hockey announcer, Mike Emerick. Great command of the language, very creative in how he described play in hockey in particular. But his voice was distinct.
Well, we toast our Breck brews and our Strava craft coffees, and if you've got your seltzers out there, toast those as well to some of these great voices in history. And you can get a bigger Breck brew, by the way, when you come down to the DNVR bar. When you become a member of the family, subscribe at thednvr.com. Get that bigger Breck brew. You get discounts on hats and shirts and masks, even though it seems like we may not have to be wearing those masks for too much longer. Still, get vaccinated, wear your mask, social distance till they tell us not to, but still, all that stuff's great. You become a member of the family and get all those things. You get a shirt down at the DNVR Locker when you sign up for the annual subscription, and a free holistic stick from our friends at Holistic Wellness. Check them out, HOLISTIK wellness.com. And after you've gotten your free holistic stick from them, you can use the promo code DNVR30 to get 30% off any of your purchases there. And while I've got everyone's ear, can also remember to get a better insurance, not make a better insurance. That would be the wrong, that'll get you to the wrong place, because it's not Mabby, it's Gabby. Our friends at Gabby. Get a better insurance. Go to GABI.com/DNVR to make sure that you're not paying too much on your home or car insurance. You probably are. Saved me $480 for the year. Saved our guy Eric Weedham over $1,000. It costs you nothing. There's no phone calls or emails or text messages. No irritating anything. So no fees. Nothing. You just go. It takes you 10 minutes or less. They give you a whole list of different insurance providers that can save you money, and then you just pick the one you like. Boom. You save money. Done and done. Check them out today at GABI.com/DNVR and see why customers are so happy nationally, on average, having saved $961 a year. You got to check them out. You're losing money if you don't.
Speaking of distinctive announcers, this is a former head football coach. He's one of I think for most people, one of the greatest analysts in the history of the NFL, John Madden. And the reason I was reminded of John Madden is, Patrick, did you notice that Creasman dropped in a boom? And right in the middle of his eloquent spot there, he dropped in a boom.
I did.
And John Madden would go, and boom, they picked up 12 yards. It's a first down for the Raiders.
And then
I've got subconscious Madden.
And of course, Emeril, and that would go from football to, like, chefs like Emeril Lagasse. He's like, I got to say bang. That became his thing. And there's another aged reference there.
Since we're there, my mom will be mad if I don't bring up Garagiola.
Joe Garagiola. I used to like Joe Garagiola on the Today Show.
Yeah.
Everybody liked Joe Garagiola.
Yeah.
How about he and Yogi grew up across the street from one another on the hill in St. Louis?
That's wild, man.
That is wild.
Baseball's a wild game. Well, since we're talking baseball history and wildness, and how about a wild career? And we all hope as human beings it's not totally over. We all knew it was winding down, but the news coming today that the Angels are parting ways with Albert Pujols, and truly, Goody, just one of the greats of all time. Certainly one of the greats of our time, Patrick and I's time. Well, growing up watching baseball, there just wasn't a better hitter in the game for a decade.
Well, his first 10 years, like, that would be a decade, right? So St. Louis.
Yeah.
And you can look it up as the line goes. For me, one of the 2 or 3, 4 greatest right-handed hitters of all time. And that 10-year run in St. Louis, almost without parallel. And yes, the next 9.5 or 9 and I guess it'll be less than a quarter with the Angels, battled injuries and was not the same. However, the totality of what he accomplished as a hitter, ridiculous. And I would think that if the Angels didn't feel like they can finally get back to the postseason this year, they're going to keep him on the roster and do him right, because he's a legendary figure. He's not just a Hall of Famer. There's different tiers. I know you guys have talked about this. There's different tiers within the Hall of Fame. There are guys who are Hall of Famers and they're all great, right? And then there are guys like Willie Mays, who turned 90 today and is the oldest living member of the Hall of Fame. the penthouse of Hall of Famers. Willie's up there, and you know what? Albert will get admittance. He'll get the special code to get into that penthouse as well.
I think people almost forget that, you know, the stuff, a lot of the things that Mike Trout is doing, you know, Pujols was right there too. You know, 3 MVPs in those first 10 years, as you said, that first decade with the Cardinals, 4 runner-up performances, you know, several Gold Gloves, Silver Slugger, Rookie of the Year.
It's almost more wild than winning the MVP. Just coming in second. That it is. This is like the times he wasn't winning, he was coming in second.
It was a joke. He's a 99.4 WAR guy. He has 3,253 hits as we speak, 667 home runs. His career at batting average, and it's kind of sad, you know, when a guy hangs on a long time. You know, it slipped under 300. It's 298. This was never a speed guy who would hit, and he was hitting 330. So remarkable career. But I was starting to say, if the Angels didn't feel like they were in it, you keep them on the roster all year. I mean, if they're an afterthought and they're just, you know, getting through the season, you play them every third day, and you kind of you do them right. But the Angels, I guess, need his roster spot to try to, you know, get a player that they feel is going to help them in their pursuit of getting back to the postseason. And
you know why they might need a roster spot? Shohei Ohtani. Now, granted, we know he's been able to kind of pull it off, you know, he finally was able to even play in the field, but he's DHing, he's pitching, and he's doing a little bit of everything. But at the same time, you maybe are short that extra fielder in the outfielder. You maybe are short that extra arm because you need a long reliever. So it's just kind of interesting how as one career takes off, another one comes to an end. And man, what a career for Pujols.
I'm trying to look at some other stuff on here. It's just remarkable how, you know, how great a player he.
Are you a fan of Jaws? Have you ever looked in that Jay Jaffe's system for ranking Hall of Famers?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan of it. I mean, I'm certainly aware of it. You know, looked at it.
He's second behind Gehrig as far as greatest first baseman. So I mean, that's pretty much rarefied air there. If you think about all the great first basemen we've had, even particularly in the last couple of decades, he's right there.
Who's third?
Well, and the other thing is, he arrived and was not good. He was great pretty much from day one. I want to say his first big league hit came against the Rockies. Don't quote me on that, but I think it did.
And I feel like it's been far enough removed. I feel like during that decade we talked a lot about it. And like you said, Goody, maybe over the last 9 years, he was not he wasn't a 1-1 draft pick guy. He wasn't a top prospect.
JUCO. He came out of junior college.
Yeah. He was
Maplewoods Junior College in Kansas City, suburban Kansas City, and he was a 13th round pick.
13th round. I couldn't remember it.
His rookie year, 2 years, by the way, after he left the JUCO. So, I mean, he got there pretty quick. His freshman year in the big leagues, he hit 37 homers, drove in 130, and he had 47 doubles. Now, this is the thing that is one of the many things, I shouldn't say the thing that separates, the many things that separate him in counting numbers, right? How many times do you think he punched out 100 times in a season?
Oh, wow.
You would think it would be maybe close to 10. Right, you would think for a typical
normal first power hitter, right?
One that's successful.
Yeah.
0?
You had 3. Did I miscount? No, 0.
Oh, none. That's right. I'm looking at his walks. Yeah.
0. He never struck out 100 times in a year, and most of those great years in St. Louis, 52, 65, 50, 58, 54, 64. You kidding me?
Man.
And he's hitting. Listen to this, Ron. I mean, I don't know if this makes for a good podcast, but whatever. 349, 314, 359, 331, 330, 331, 327, 357, 327. It just
unreal.
30 home runs, 100 RBI with all of that.
Every year.
Every year.
Every year. His ribbies, the first 10 years, he must have been hurt. Yep. He played 147 games, so he missed a few more than normal, and he drove in 99 in his last year in St. Louis. That was the first time he didn't drive in 100 in his career. First year with the Angels, 105. Third year, 105. He actually had 400 rib a year years in Anaheim. You know what's fascinating though, guys? After he left St. Louis, his last year in St. Louis, he hit 299. He never hit 300 again.
Oh, wow.
The body, you remember, and there were always whispers because, back in the day, sometimes the kids from Latin America, and even in the United States, I shouldn't just say Latin America, their birth certificate wasn't necessarily accurate. Jeff Houston's told this story publicly, so I'm not speaking out of school here. Jeff was an undrafted free agent signee out of the University of Wyoming. He signed for $1,500 at the NBC tournament. It's a tournament I played in years ago in Wichita, and he was playing for Beatrice, their team out of Beatrice, Nebraska. And scout came up to him with the Expos and said, "Hey, would you like to play pro ball?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course, right?" And he said, "Well, we'll give you $1,500 and an invitation to spring training next year." And he said, "All right, I need a couple of particulars." And he obviously signed the deal. And he said, "How old are you? What's your birthday?" And Huey gave him his birthday, and it was 1962. And he said, "You know what?" He goes, "You need to be a little younger. We're going to make that 1964. So Jeff, on the back of all his baseball cards, it says that he was born in 1964. And when he had to file, he had a 12-year big league career. When he had to file his retirement papers with the union, he told the woman who was in charge of that, he said, "Oh, by the way, listen, for pension purposes," he goes, I was actually born, it says I was born in 64, but I was actually born in 1962, because now he wants to make sure it matches and there isn't any problems down the road."
Right.
She laughed and she said, "Do you know how many times I've heard that story?" It's commonplace, they make guys younger, and that was always the rumor about Pujols.
Right.
There's no way he could just be, well, he's listed now at 41. He's actually probably a couple years older. Who knows? But the body did start to break down once he had left St. Louis.
So if this is his final year at age 41, maybe it's his final year at age 45. We don't know. It's a little more understandable. They let him go. And by the way, Jeff Houston's baseball reference page still says 1964.
That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I have one bone to pick, though, with one of the greatest of all time. He stole a couple of Gold Gloves from Todd Helton. I'll never get over that. It was during that string of time where you were definitely winning Gold Gloves for being a great offensive player who could also play capable defense and grabbing headlines and stuff. But there was no point during that stretch, and I think Pujols got 3 Gold Gloves. There was no point during that time where he was actually a better defensive first baseman than Todd Helton. He was very good for a minute there, but. That's the only negative thing I had to really stretch to think of a negative thing I could say about him, because he's truly one of the game's greats. And by all accounts, one of the warmest people. I've told the story a bunch of times, only met him the one time, but just seemed like such a great, humble, big, joyous man.
Yeah, I saw him the last time I saw him. To keep in mind, you'd see him for us. I would see him. My first year with the Rockies was actually doing the games, not just doing pregame and postgame. Was 2002, so he was a second year player, and you develop. That's one of the things I miss right now, and doing my job properly and conveying stories and anecdotes to people at home every evening is the time. You guys know this because we're all out there at the same time every day. Is being around the players, being around the batting cage, and developing relationships and I was able to develop, a decent relationship with him. And the last time I saw him was a couple of years ago when the Rockies were playing the Angels, naturally. And, it's not like he knows you by name, but he knows who you are and what you do. And not just, "Hey, man, how you doing?" fist bump or a handshake. Comes over and gives me, and this, he had done this on a few different occasions, gives me a big hug. And he's like, "How you doing? How you been?" And, truly, a very warm guy. So yes, I would second what you said, Drew, about Pujols. And in my lifetime, or at least let me say this: in my years covering baseball, the greatest right-handed hitters off the top of my head, Pujols would be number one. The next guy, like so many players now, somewhat controversial, but Manny Ramirez, is right up there.
Yeah, I mean,
you can't forget about him.
Yeah,
Miguel Cabrera.
Who's that one?
Miggy.
Miguel Cabrera, right there in that combo.
Listen, because he's still playing, and yes, I don't know if he's walking up the 17th fairway or the 18th fairway. He's walking off something on the back nine. He's deep into his round, right? Yeah. But yes, when you start looking at his numbers, somewhat similar guys to Pujols in that he hit for average and he hit for power, and he wasn't a speed guy. He's not getting leg hits.
Right. None of those top 8 hits for those guys.
No. And I can remember my first year kind of on the beat in 2018. The Rockies had a minor league guy, Sean O'Malley, that I talked with a little bit in Albuquerque, and he kind of mentioned a story like he made his debut at the Angels, and just shared a little bit about Pujols kind of going out of his way to really celebrate him and welcome him to the ball club. Just this kid who wasn't even a huge prospect. Just look, I made my debut, and Pujols, the leader in the clubhouse, kind of really made me feel appreciated and welcomed. And that tells you what kind of guy he is.
This is where I really wish, and it'd be fascinating to see how it plays out, because like the Angels, the Cardinals, naturally, who the Rockies will start playing tomorrow on the weekend, which is a whole nother topic I'm sure we'll get into here in a second. But if there was a DH in the National League, which we all know will be instituted again when they get, hopefully, this CBA done in an orderly fashion. But wouldn't it be great to see Albert play the last few months in a Cardinals uniform where it began? Because he needs to play somewhere. And somebody is going to take him in, but it can't be a National League team, right? So where does he? Maybe, hey, you know what? But Kansas City's playing great baseball. I mean, is it Kansas City? Because it is Missouri. Kansas City, as we talked about, is where he went to junior college.
There we go.
Right?
Well, we saw Matt Holliday do it late in his career for a short amount of time. We know Clemens did it for numerous years, and we don't have to say why, but was able to kind of say, look, if we shorten the season a little bit, and I can really go all in. So you know what? If he decides to step away a little bit, maybe he's able to recuperate somewhat on his health and give a good final push for 6-8 weeks, to help a team down the stretch. I know rosters aren't going to expand like they have in the past, but there's that hope, right, that he can go out somewhat on top, so to speak.
Yeah,
write his own ending.
I think everybody in the sport would love it not to be. His career ended when he was DFA'd on May the 6th, 2021. You like to say, you know what? He played his final few months Kansas City, hit a few home runs, doffed his cap, and like we mentioned with Willie Mays, one of the thrills of when I was a kid was, the last couple of years of Willie Mays' historic career was back in New York, with the Mets, and it worked. His last hit, I was reading some pieces about him today, turning 90. His last hit was Game 2 of the World Series that year at 73 between the Mets and the A's, which eventually would go 7 games, and much to my disappointment, went to the A's in 7 games. But in Game 2, 6-6 game in the 12th inning, Willie Mays came up and had a single to center to drive in the go-ahead run. The Mets would go on to win. They scored a few more times, so they won comfortably in 12 against the A's, and that turned out to be his last major league hit.
Mets always seem to win those Game 6s, don't they?
Yeah, I think that was game 6. I meant Game 2. I think it was early. It was earlier in the series, but I wish they would won that Game 7. No,
and you were right. Pujols' first hit did come not only against the Rockies, but in Colorado. How about that?
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's fantastic. Yeah, I hadn't remembered that. Yeah. So, speaking of games being played here in Colorado, let's get out onto the field. Rockies on a little bit of a roll. I guess we'll talk about that series and what just happened there. We do have to remind everybody that one of the best ways to watch sports is to do so along with your DraftKings Sportsbook app. and get a little extra skin in the game. Helps make it more fun. You can follow along, whether you're betting before the game just on certain kinds of outcomes, like the over-under on number of runs scored or who's going to win or what the strikeouts are going to be. Maybe you're picking guys to hit a home run. Or remember that you can follow along during games and start betting on like individual outcomes of at-bats, which can be a lot of fun. Bet on all kinds of different sports. NBA and hockey still going on. That stuff is absolutely heating up here in our local market. And for those of you that got in early on your Nikola Jokic MVP bets, you're going to be making some dollar bills, y'all. So, excuse me. So yeah, make sure you hop on there if you haven't yet. Still a good time to do it, especially for those of you that are fight fans. Right now, if you download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app and use promo code DNVR, they will turn $1 into $55 on this weekend's main event. All you got to do is pick the winner of the fight. That's right, DraftKings Sportsbook going all out for the new users by giving them a chance to win $55 when placing a bet of just $1 on this weekend's big fight only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only, new customers only, restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
And for that big fight, my DraftKings Sportsbook pick of the week, no surprise, it will be Canelo Alvarez over Billy Joe Saunders. But it's how it's going to be done, because if you just take the win, it's not going to pay out so much. So take the KO, TKO, or disqualification at -110. And if you really want a big payout, you can throw a couple bucks on him doing it in the 8th round. You win $1,000 there. So that's plus 1,000. Again, he's fighting Billy Joe Saunders. Now, if you hear that name, Billy Joe Saunders,
that's the lead singer of Green Day, right?
That's probably going to be one of your first thoughts, right? You could go as a backup quarterback in the late 80s for the New Orleans Saints. Billy Joe Hebert, if you recall him. Actually, it was more early 90s. Billy Joe Hebert. Later played with the Falcons. And then Saunders, I don't know. He's British. I was a little blown away. He's 30-0, but
Billy Joe, wasn't it Bobby Hebert?
It was, yes. Bobby Hebert.
Bobby Joe?
You called me on that one. Who am I thinking of? Not Billy Joe Robideau, not him.
I remember Billy Joe Robideau.
Maybe I'm mixing those names up. There had to have been a QB named Billy Joe.
Power rank all-time Billy Joes.
Bobby Hebert was good.
Billy Joe Dupree, right? Is it was Billy Joe Dupree? The tight end for the Cowboys?
I got nothing.
Or am I mixing that up? It was Dupree. I'm sure. Well,
I only go back to Jason Witten. I don't go back that far.
So the Colorado Rockies.
Good transition. Good transition. Yeah.
Thanks, man. What a goodie. Wow. What a wild set with the Giants. We talked about it on the series wrap yesterday with Makayla, but when the other team comes into your house and scores 10 runs in the first inning of a doubleheader, and then you're into the last half inning of that doubleheader down 4, you're thinking, man, these guys don't even look like they belong on the same field as the Giants. And then, boom, win the series. Baseball's a funny game, isn't it?
Baseball's a funny game. By the way, it was Billy Joe Dupree. I remembered correctly. Somewhere in that first game, first inning, you wanted as an announcer to go Harry Carey and reach for a cold beverage because that was sobering.
Too sobering.
I mean, you're down 10-0. They've been out in the field for a half hour. You're like, no mas, right? No. So the game's over before you hit the bat rack. And then in game 2, it starts out. Remember, it's 2-0 in the first inning in game 2.
Right.
They scored in the first game on Wednesday as well. I think it was 2-0, right?
Yeah. Well, it was the second inning on Wednesday. John Gray struck out the side in the first, and then the second inning, Crawford naturally hit a home run.
So they were down.
Here's a guarantee when the Giants play the Rockies: either Crawford, Belt, or Posey, or 2 of the 3, or maybe even 3 of the 3 are going to hit a home run against the Rockies every game.
Yeah.
Not every other game, every game.
Right.
Yeah. So. Anyhow, it's 2-0. We get to your point, Drew. You get to the 9th inning or 7th inning, and it's 6-2. And we know what happened. The Rockies with 2 outs, they rally, and then Charlie on a 3-2 pitch against Oval hits it, deep into the night, and you're like, holy bleep, They just won this game. Their game, we've all seen it, right? Especially at Coors Field, where there's that really nice comeback and the walk-off in the ninth inning. And they're always fun, man. Yeah. They're always entertaining. But this one really came out of, as I think I said this on the air, proverbial left field, in that they had nothing going. Like Drew was saying, man, it was like the varsity playing the freshmen for most of that night. And then bing, bang, bing, boom, boom, boom. The Rockies won. What? How'd that happen? And you know what? And good for them. They went out and played, John Gray pitched a good ball game Wednesday, and they ended up taking 2 out of 3 from. That's why we love baseball, right? They take 2 out of 3 from the Giants, who are in first place in the National League West. They're playing really well. And if I told you, as we embarked on the bottom of the ninth inning in game 2, Rockies are going to win, fellas, and they're also going to win the series. They go, hey, listen, I have a friend. He's a therapist. He can help you out. There's medication you can take for whatever afflicts you, right? You got some issues right now.
Right. Even when Charlie Blackmon was standing at the plate, and it was it really was one of those moments in life where you go, well, this goes one of 2 ways. Charlie's having a rough year, and we all know he's a better ball player than this. But as we talked about with Albert Pujols, Father Time, undefeated, and we're all sitting there wondering, is it catching up with him? Is it not? He's had such a rough year. The comeback wasn't complete. All of this wildness has happened to get the Rockies to be down 1. Chuck rolls one over to the second baseman there. His nightmare of a season continues. The Rockies lose that game. The deflation of it would have been so in the other direction, but to see this veteran player who we know can be very serious, fellas, and when he needs to be, the joy on his face after hitting that walk-off home run, like one of the best things I think we're going to see from this season from the Rockies, just that moment for him.
Yeah, and it led him, guys, to he had a really nice ball game on Wednesday, 2 for 4. He drove in a couple of runs, and it was also, like you said, it was unlikely. I mean, I said in my podcast this week, and John Gray, who pitched well on Wednesday, is our guest this week. And Charlie would be normally a likely source to have a walk-off homer, right? Most tenured guy. He's had a great career. He's always, like so many good hitters, hit exceptionally well at Coors Field. He has a slow heartbeat. All the things that would suggest, okay, if somebody's to do it, Charlie'd be a hell of a candidate. But to what Creasman was talking about, he was 0 for 7 in the doubleheader. The advanced metrics suggest his expected batting average should be much better than what it was. But listen, he's hitting well. Listen, Mario Mendoza's going, how's it feeling down there? Right? I mean, he was well below 200. Entering play that day when he comes to the plate. And it's why, again, I did a long thing on this on the podcast. It's why we love sports. If you think about it, Patrick, who was your team growing up in football?
The Atlanta Falcons.
All right, you're a mess. So
yes. Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
I don't know how Jersey kids following the Falcons, but listen.
Dion.
Drew, who was your team?
The Broncos. Right. Yeah, the John Elway Denver Broncos. That was pretty easy for me.
So the thing is we all know, even though the Broncos have had so many great seasons, the last several notwithstanding, it's hard to win. It's hard to be the last one standing. So if your joy in the team you follow only can come with a parade, you're going to have a lot of disappointing years. Look at the Nugget fans, right? I did the Nuggets for 10 years. They've never even been to the finals.
Right.
But if they have a dramatic win on a night in January, or your favorite baseball team, even though they're decidedly under 500 and very mediocre, as we know right now, they have a dramatic walk-off win, an improbable one when they're down 4 runs, you get out of your chair. Even though we all know at the end of the year it's probably not going to result in a parade, it's still why we love sports, why we gravitate to sports.
It's as you described on the podcast. It's a moment. It's one of those moments that, yes, the Rockies aren't going to win the World Series this year, but it's going to be a moment you're not going to forget, and you're going to be able to call back on years later. And it's a major highlight.
Yeah,
for this organization right now.
Yeah, and like Patrick's saying, it's I don't know if we're not going to put it in the pantheon of Helton's
right
against Saito, or even my buddy Spilly, our home run at the Grand Slam, because we know what it led to. But this one was pretty memorable. Remember that cold night in early May when the Rockies weren't very good and the Giants are rolling and they're down 6-2 and Chuck hasn't been very good, and then boom. Yeah, you remember stuff like that.
And look at the Giants right now. Again, first place, best team in the NL West. We know it might not end up that way, but a lot of these teams that are in first place after the first month of the season, at least half of them, I think, end up going on and making the postseason. So it'll be interesting we know what it means for the Rockies, but for the Giants, it can mean that much more, where they might fall one game short of maybe winning the West or even making the postseason. We'll go back and look and say, wow, those 2 games over the course of 24 hours on Tuesday and Wednesday against the Rockies, and Blackmon's walk-off and the big burst in the 9th inning the next night, it's unbelievable. It makes a difference.
Yeah, and as people that follow the Rockies and pull for the Rockies, if you're on the other side of that one is the old kick in the gut, because
that's rough.
You probably felt at that point, if you're a Giant fan, you're like, we could throw anybody right now and we're going to get 3 outs and be able to shake hands and celebrate, because the Rockies don't look very good tonight. And they haven't looked very good against the Giants, period, all year. At that point, they'd lost 6 of 7 when they were staring down the 4-run deficit with 2 outs in the 7th inning.
Right.
I have to get used to saying 7th inning there, by the way.
Yeah.
I know that one's throwing me off, and I couldn't help the irony of it either. The fact that and I try to make a big deal about the hangover effect and the research I've done, and when the Rockies go to California, straight to these places like San Francisco, San Diego, no day in between, anything like that. It takes a while for the offense to get going. It's the polar opposite environment. And then I think it's really funny. Then you see those guys go straight from California. You see all these really pretty ERAs, Goody, when they're pitching in San Diego, San Francisco, LA, staying in the same states, not going any time zones. And then they come out here, and all of a sudden those ERAs go up a little bit. The stuff happens, and, they may want to blame the ballpark a little bit one way or the other. We know the people out there doing it, but it's like, it's funny that you think it only goes the one direction, because look, man, you got to go to the polar opposite environment, and you got to compete under the same situation as everybody else there as well. So, Gabe Kapler had some funny comments about some of this stuff, but I just, it always, I'll use this phrase. It tickles me when people want to deny some of the Rockies' offensive struggles on the road and the reality of going to the polar opposite environment. And then you see some of these guys who've been pitching in very comfortable environments come out here. It starts to slip away from you a little bit, and boom, there goes the game. That's like our 12th boom, I think, by the way. John Madden's presence is lingering heavily over this spot.
I'm glad, because I miss Madden, man. I miss doing games on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. But what do you make of that dynamic when you see how the team has to do that? And we'll let you go on this one. And then, as you said earlier, we see these games do happen a little bit more often at Coors Field. Wild comebacks can happen in baseball anywhere. That's the great thing about a game with no clock. But, that's part of dealing with it. And so I think it's funny when people are like, Coors Field, but they don't see that opposite.
Drew, people are probably tired of me getting on my soapbox on television about it. It's do your homework nationally. When people suggest, Trevor Story's a nice player, but look at his splits. Nolan Arenado's a nice player, look at his splits. Charlie Blackmon's a nice player, look at his splits. Matt Holliday, nice player, look at his splits. Well, then what happens? Guys like that, obviously, one of the guys I mentioned had, a couple of those guys haven't left Colorado, but they all do just fine. Good is good. Great is great. And when you witness what we have over the years, and that it's real when they go to parks immediately after leaving altitude, it's an adjustment with ball movement. It's adjustment with body. There's empirical evidence of that. And beyond that, just ask the players. I mean, talk to the players, and then go look at what Matt Holliday did after. Look at where Nolan is. Is he hitting on the road? Is he still a really good player? Absolutely. Absolutely. So that, to me, that's just not, that's a lazy approach. And it's also lazy to perpetuate that myth. And coupled with what you bring up, Drew, is, and you touched on this, is it's not just leaving altitude and say going to Cleveland or whatever. It's leaving and going to pitcher havens, Dodger Stadium, San Francisco. Petco's become a little more offensive friendly since they moved fences. Same thing a little bit with San Francisco. But if you're a pitcher and you say, hey, where can you achieve the lowest ERA? Give me 3 parks. Well, 3 of the top, 4 or 5 that are going to be mentioned are the 3 in the National League West outside of Arizona that everyone has to visit. And for the Rockies, they have to go out there. It's going to be somewhere between, 29, 30, 31 times, depending on, 10 here, 9 there, and, it switches every year. That's a fifth of their schedule. And every time they go there, or most every time, it's having recently or immediately having left altitude. That's tough. And that affects everyone and everyone's splits. I mean, it'd be tough enough if they were going, as I said, to a, maybe it's a, give me a hitter, even if they were going to Cincinnati and Great American Ballpark, it still would affect them. But now they're going to places that are hard to score on, man, or score in.
Yeah. 2
of those 3 parks, though, you guys know, you've been there. It's like the heavy marine air comes in at night.
Reversed altitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
and final thing, real quick, because I know you gotta get going. Good is good, great is great. Nolan Arenado has done pretty well making that transition. We're gonna see Colorado. We're gonna see the Rockies going against the Cardinals this weekend. How you thought about how weird it's gonna be calling that game and writing Arenado's name on the other side of your scorebook?
I think we as a crew, and I was talking to one of our producers about this last night and how we wanted to, handle game one. A lot of times we do what's known as a tease, which you guys know, being in the business, and it's kind of, before you even show anything, the first thing people see are, the voiceover and highlights and maybe a musical medley of a guy, and you're telling a story. Think of leading into the final Sunday of the Masters and Tigers, near the top of the leaderboard. It's going to be a Tiger tease, and then you'll hear, Jim Nance and he'll welcome you in and that sort of thing. So we're talking about a tease for Friday night's ball game in St. Louis, and we're thinking a lot about this. And what we basically came up with, because it's awkward, isn't it? I mean, it's a very controversial trade, very unpopular trade, and so for those reasons, being the broadcast home of the Rockies, it's how do you characterize it? But I think what we came up with is this series is really more about Nolan and how he performs against the Rockies, and it's only human nature. I'm sure he's going to have even more butterflies than he normally would, and he's going to really be motivated naturally to do well. Not that he isn't on a daily basis, but we all understand that. And then when he comes back to Denver later in the year, it's then more about the fans in Colorado and their reaction to him, and probably their celebration when he takes the field, and probably then there can be more fans in the stands. Who knows? Hopefully at that point in time there could be 50,000 if that many people come out. So I kind of look at it as this one is about Nolan, and the next one is kind of where the hometown fans have an opportunity to react to his presence in a Cardinal uniform. But it's going to be strange. There's no denying that.
Very
Yeah.
strange.
Well,
Very strange indeed. I think that could describe this entire weekend for sure.
Yeah. It's going to be a wild one. We're definitely going to have our eyes glued to the TV for that one. And we'll have our ears glued to your podcast. You know, we've got Katie Wu coming on tomorrow to do more preview of the Cardinals series. We're going to dive deep into that. And we've double dipped. We also have John Gray on the show. So if you John Gray fans, if you can't get enough, you got to go and listen to the Drew Goodman podcast. Lots of great stuff there. We're going to goof off with him on we'll play that for you on Sunday on the series wrap. We've got that for you, but it should be you know, we've been talking about all year. It's been an entertaining season. It's been, and there's no way this series is going to be boring.
No, this series I would think will be interesting. And kind of a sidebar is Gomber's tournament coming up in St. Louis, right?
Right.
Yeah. Like,
he's got something to prove too. Yeah.
He's got something to prove. You kidding me? Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
You couldn't write it any better. It's like the baseball gods know.
Yeah, that's why again, I know I'm being redundant here. It's why we love sports. We never thought what happened Tuesday night late was coming. And even for a team that has not been very good record-wise so far, there are stories and there are moments, and there's things that, you know, are intriguing. I mean, look at the Yankees now, right? They've won 5 in a row. A week ago it was doom and gloom and
fire everybody, cut everybody, trade everyone.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, we're going to keep having fun. We're going to keep watching Rockies baseball. We're going to keep enjoying those moments in between and those individual performances and all the fun stuff that's happened. Even the proverbial Raimel Tapia hitting a grand slam in a game you know you're not going to win. It's like that. That's what it's about, right? That's what we're enjoying, having those moments. So thank you so much, Goody, for hanging out with us each week. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and your stories and all that stuff with us. As we said, you're probably listening to this on a podcast app right now, which means it's very easy just to go over, download the Drew Goodman podcast, give it a listen. John Gray on this week. Fantastic guests all the time on there. You know where to find all the stuff on AT&T Sportsnet watching the game. We know you're all watching this weekend. Going to be glued to that thing. So as we said before, make sure you're subscribing to the DNVR.com. You're following everybody on social media at Drew Creasman, at Patrick D. Lyons, at Drew Goodman 42, at DNVR_Rockies, and at Makayla E. Perkins. Make sure you're following her as well. We appreciate each and every one of you for continuing to be absolutely awesome out there. We promise to continue being absolutely Patrick Lyons and the Drews Creasman and Goodman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.